Welcome, everybody. We're excited to jump into this session. We've got Kait Stephens, the CEO and co-founder of Brij, and also the host of the Omnichannel Marketer podcast. Kait, thanks so much for joining. And how the heck are you?
I'm doing great, Gabe. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, this is a fun one. A lot of people, I think the podcast, you're involved in Shop Talk. It's great that you dedicated some time to this. So thanks so much for jumping on. Excited to jump into this topic about omni-channel marketing and kind of this modern view of it. Before we do that, maybe just take a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the fun things you guys have been doing.
Sure. So my quick background, I started my career investing in omni-channel and the future of retail, and on the private equity side. Discovered this problem in the retail space. Basically, when brands sell through retail, they lose their customer data. $1 trillion massive problem that's gone unsolved for decades. And I just thought that shouldn't be what exists anymore. Went to Harvard Business School, started Brij, a software platform to bridge the offline and online for brands. And so, it is my, work's passion to solve this problem. And then love it so much that I started a podcast called the Omnichannel Marketer, where I bring on brands and experts in the space to, hear why, like how they're solving this problem, because it is such a big one.
Yeah, cool. I didn't realize, I mean, I remember the Harvard background, but the name we were debating, but that makes a lot of sense as you bridge the gap on some of these different methodologies, online, offline. That makes tons of sense. Well, want to dive into the topic. I know you, with the podcast in particular, you speak to so many different brands and you experience a lot of their stories. I'm curious, what trends are kind of separating the winners from the losers in your mind?
So, from a trend perspective, I would say you really need to think about the entire end-to-end consumer experience and how that, plays into your brand across all channels. And so, I think that brands will do this really well with your e-commerce journey, but you need to take it, 10 steps further and think about, how does this interaction that my brand is having with my consumer show up at Target? How does this show up in Amazon? And what can I do as a brand to connect all of those experiences? So I think that that's the framework under which you need to think about this. A couple of brands who I think do it exceptionally well. One of our early customers is Feastables. And they're one of their early employees actually invested in our company that because it was like such a good fit. And so Feastables is backed by Mr. Beast,
Of
who has
course.
this unbelievable digital presence. But 99% of their sales are through like retail. So you buy candy bars in grocery stores. So
Yeah.
they have a QR code on their product that they're constantly shifting the content behind. So they're using the power of the content that they're creating from Mr. Beast to drive interaction from like people buying their candy bars on that QR code. And so they're, often doing sweepstakes through that QR code to collect data from their customers. And this becomes a retention marketing strategy to
Wow.
understand who their customers are from retail, but then also speak to them on a one-to-one basis on a regular basis, which, if they were not doing that, collecting that data, they wouldn't be able to speak to those customers at all because they're acquiring them from retail. So
Wow, that's a cool
that's like
example.
one example of like really using kind of that content lens.
But really looking at it more like that full journey as well. I mean, it sounds like that bridges the gap between offline and online, but kind of be able to take it from cradle to grave. I like that. As you think about this word omni-channel, it's been around a little bit in the last few years, but it feels like it's molded, it's taken shape, it's changed a little bit. How do you kind of feel like, what does omni-channel mean today versus maybe what it's meant a little bit in the past?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think some people would historically think about omni-channel as I have an owned store and I sell at that owned store. That is not my definition. I really think about omni-channel as the way the consumer shops.
Hmm.
So thus it is not just a physical store. It is all of the touch points that a consumer has with your brand, which is, if you think about it, that is actually how a consumer shops. You
Hmm.
have digital touch points, you have in-store touch points, you have, touch points at events, brand marketing events. And these are all different touch points that go into the purchase decision of a consumer. And so
Yeah.
I think about omnichannel as anywhere the consumer can shop you.
Yeah.
And done best, it's making it really easy for the consumer to shop you wherever they want.
Yeah.
And the best brands today are making it easy for their customer. They're saying, we know we have some Amazon customers and we're going to let them shop us if that's what where they want to shop us. I would say
Yeah.
2 years ago, there was still a lot of brands that were resisting Amazon and even, retail for that matter. One, because there was, such a boom in e-commerce and D2C that it was, still cheap to acquire customers on D2C. I think that, frothiness has gone away. Brands need to build more profitable businesses.
For sure.
Distribution like Amazon and retail is very powerful from a reaching your customer perspective. And so I would say like reframing meeting your customer wherever you are as as what best in class omni-channel looks like,
Yeah.
as opposed to really like dictating we're a D2C brand or we're a retail brand. Like all brands should really meet their customer wherever that customer wants to shop them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Meet them where they are. Do you feel like there's certain instances? Sometimes I feel like people struggle to determine where their customers are, how to figure that out. Is there quick advice you've found to kind of start down that path of, maybe you should be here more than there, and that is just listening to your customers, or what advice would you give to people wrestling a little bit with that idea of meeting customers where they are?
Yeah, it's a great question. Listen, you have to think about who your customer is, what your product is, because even how heavy it is, because all of those things could play into, among many other factors, where your customer shops you and where you should show up in a
Mhm.
way that makes most sense for your
Yep.
consumer. And so different categories of brands like will show up differently. For example, in grocery, or if you're a CPG brand, that's where, 95% of purchasing decisions are made for CPG brands. So you need to be there versus an apparel brand can grow a much like bigger presence as a D2C first brand. And so like the category matters a lot. But Gabe, I think that you referenced this, like understanding your customer um,
Yeah.
and speaking to them, understanding, where they like to be and where they shop will dictate your channel strategy and where you should be showing up to allow them to shop you in an easy way. And so one transition that I've seen in the way that brands think about D2C is yes, it is one way to sell to your customers, but it's also the fastest feedback loop to understand your customers and where
Mm.
they want to shop you. And so
Yeah.
using that feedback loop, whether it's, with surveys or just reaching out to customers to interview them,
Like that.
is
Like
going to
that.
be your best way to learn more about where they shop. But your product will also, the type of product you have will also dictate a lot of your channel strategy.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's great. There's different means I think you can get some of that information. I'm curious what your take is just on, I mean, you deal with this so often, but sometimes I think it's the fun marketing words you'll hear, like offline is dead or physical locations are dying. But then every once in a while, you'll see D2C brands, or I think certain companies like find a nice niche and they'll find certain locations that kind of work. I'm just curious your take on the physical retail locations. It feels like sometimes it's dying and then sometimes it's coming back, and different brands find that it works. Any quick take on kind of how you see the future of the
Mm.
physical retail location kind of playing out?
Yeah. So just like by just like market scale perspective, retail is 6x the size as of D2C. So it is massive. And so the opportunity that like from a distribution perspective for brands is massive.
Yeah.
Their D2C is limited by Meta right now. If you're not like crushing it on TikTok on a regular basis. So
Yeah.
on the organic side. So that is like just a sizing. As it relates to like retail is dead. The US is over retailed. That is a like the amount of retail space. That is honestly more of a retail, like physical retail. It's like a real estate problem.
Hmm.
So than it is a like how brands should think about showing up.
Okay.
That's kind of just like a fact that the US
Yeah.
like per capita has too much retail.
Interesting. Okay.
But that's like some of my private equity knowledge for you.
Yeah, that's how
The
you pull that up.
um, the distribution that retailers provide at scale is like unmatched. There is not a similar lever in D2C. Let me give you an example. So one of our customers, their name is Ghazni. Super high growth, started digitally native. They're an Uni competitor, super
Yeah. Okay.
luxurious, luxurious outdoor pizza oven. Started in the UK, which is why you like might not be as familiar. I like learned about them and I was like, wow, they're a massive brand.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I'm a uni. I've got one here in,
You
in
have an
in
uni.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So they landed Home Depot as a channel
Oh,
partner, and overnight they went from 100% D2C to, probably 75% of their sales are made out through wholesale. And that is what
wow.
one retail partner can do for a brand. And so
Wow.
from a scale perspective, retail is unmatched. From an access to customers perspective, Amazon is unmatched. When I think about retail, I also think about marketplaces. Amazon, Walmart.com is building like an ad network similar to Amazon to allow brands to access the customer database that they have.
Mm,
And
mm.
so it's people want to shop across multiple different touch points,
Yeah,
even
for
to
sure. Sure.
discover. And so, I mean, I am very bullish on retail because it is
Mm,
I'm very bullish on retail. It is an access point that is more scalable for brands. D2C is always going to be the best way to have a quick feedback loop and speak to
yeah, yeah,
customers.
yeah.
Um, but but
Scaling, it's tougher.
but
Yeah, it does.
scaling, yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that piece is so critical.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great perspective. Well, I'm glad I asked that. I thought might have an interesting perspective. I love the private equity, pulling out the private equity background. Um, if you put yourself in the shoes, so many of the companies that are tuning in, are probably on the smaller scale, and a lot of them are getting up kind of as a new brand today. And curious what you would recommend being kind of your first three omni-channel moves if you were a new brand kind of entering the market today.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I would recommend from just like a company culture and alignment perspective is that incentives are aligned across channels. And so I'll use, Quip as an example. They're a true omni-channel brand. They have D2C, they have retail that all roll up to an omni-channel P&L leader.
Yeah.
What that does is it allows you to make decisions that are truly best for the brand and best for the company. Because if you just set KPIs for ecom and then for retail, those are sometimes going to clash.
Mm,
And so, aligning the team incentives to work together for the betterment of the entire brand. I would say like from the get-go, that's something that you should be thinking about. Um,
yep.
the second is, aligning on the entire consumer journey and how that fits into channel strategy. So
Yep.
again, going back to what is your brand? Where does the consumer want to shop you? So what channels should you be showing up in? And how do you think about your product showing up in that channel differently or the same? I'll give you an example. The packaging in D2C can be very different than what it needs to be in retail. In
Yeah.
retail, you have this much time to catch the consumer's eye to get them to pick you up off of the shelf. And so,
Yeah.
how do you need to think about what shows up on the packaging differently when you're entering retail? And the third piece I'd recommend is collect data.
Mm,
Use QR codes, collect data in whatever way that you can, because
yeah.
that customer that is discovering you in retail can become a, long-term customer online or and vice versa. If you're collecting their email, if you're collecting their phone number, you can tell them to repurchase and purchase more food from Target.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like
Yeah.
that, those three things are, where I would recommend getting started.
I love those. I love those. I'm thinking about the aligning the incentives. Where does that typically break down? Like um, just maybe an example or even real or something that you kind of have in your back
I
pocket.
have
Like,
I have so many examples of when I've been talking to stakeholders and maybe I'm talking to the e-commerce person or maybe I'm
sure,
talking
sure.
to like the salesperson and they'll be like, oh, well, you know what? That's really in the e-com teams. Or no, that doesn't touch my P&L. That's
Yeah,
the sales
yeah.
team. And you're like, okay,
Ah, yeah, yeah.
you're like, whoa, you hear it the second they say it, you're like, this is bad. You guys are not going to be doing well. But like when they think like that, they're like, this isn't my problem.
Yeah,
And so
interesting.
it's like when you have like, if your KPIs are too siloed in a way that it incentivizes behavior from a team that doesn't roll up. It's different when when you're selling to a CEO or C-suite that like they have that natural aligned incentive with like the company. When you go down to, executionists, if you're not aligning company goals to like how, and perhaps it's a little bit of an education thing too, how these things help each other.
Mm.
That's a huge problem.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I know that siloed thinking. It's one group. It's not my problem. Toss it to somebody else. They'll deal with it. Okay, that's super helpful. Love the talk track. So much good information. A lot of people tuning in today feeling, overwhelmed. There's so much changing in the industry, always being asked to do more with less type of thing. Some great talking points today, but I'm curious if there's something that comes to mind as kind of a leave behind or any advice you'd kind of give to the group as we wrap today.
Yeah. Start collecting data from all of your channels,
Yeah.
and do so in a thoughtful way that gives something to the consumer in exchange for their data. And so, what that
Mm.
requires is a thoughtful call to action that
Yeah.
delivers a value transfer to them in exchange for data collection.
Yeah.
Consumers are willing to share their data, but they want to be incentivized to do so. They
Yeah.
want to have a relationship with their brand. They actually don't even realize it when they're buying through retail or Amazon that they don't have a relationship with the brand. And so that is my like absolute take behind what we've
Love
seen
that.
is it is unbelievable the incremental revenue that you can drive by owning those customers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm one. I love to actually give data. Like I want to have more personalization with brands, so I'm actually super open to give.
And
But to your point, it's great if there is a little bit of like a reciprocal, like if I'm going to give data to have something back. The QR code, that's fast. I didn't even think of that with Feastables that you mentioned in the beginning. Like, what a great way to kind of like make it fun, bring a sweepstakes in there, offline, online. That's a fun way to kind of bring some of that together. So awesome. All right. Well, again, Kait, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a million things going on. I think that advice will be super balanced for the team. And so thank you for joining and for the audience. Have a fantastic day.
thank you, Gabe. Appreciate it.